So Roland, I will let you take it away.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you guys for staying around. I appreciate it. I got in at 9:15 this morning. I was a little concerned. We only had 2 tables filled, so I figured we'll just make it a round table, but, you know, I'll take 4. All right, so I'm here to talk about MTA, and I think in my conversations with most of you, I've already pitched this to a certain extent. So simply put, what we're trying to do at HP is, given the deprecation of the cookie, we're trying to figure out different ways to measure the impact of our media and market, right? So let me take you through it. It's not moving. There it is. Beautiful. Look at that. Okay. So yeah, as we know, the cookie is going away, and so within HP, within our Instant Ink specific product, and what it is it's essentially a subscription ink product that automatically replenishes your printer when you run out, right? So it's not something that delivers every single month, but it goes based on the availability of ink within your printer. All right, so moving forward. So in the past, we relied on cookies, right? So the ability to understand the touch points within the journey was essentially based on cookies, right? So what I've done here is just demonstrate a very simple journey where, based on the CTV exposure, capture it, the person searches, they come to our site, eventually enroll in Instant Ink, and the printer is set up, right? So a very simple, basic journey, which actually gave us the understanding of that customer journey when we looked at the old iteration of the MTA model, which was cookie dependent. Before that, we also used to rely on the last touch, which also did not give us enough value, so we shifted to there. And just as we did that, you know, Google decided we're going to take the cookies away. So essentially what we're trying to do was trying to understand what can we do and build a system that will give us a better understanding of the touch points that was not reliant on the cookie, and effectively help us understand where the credit was due and assign the credit accordingly. So what we did was we built it based on these different factors, right? So an IP address, a jump ID, and an email, right? So we had to build it without the cookie and see how effective it was. And so after building it, we have actually measured its efficacy against a cookie journey, and we are seeing about a 98% accurate measurement. Right, so I'm going to go through this a little bit with the IP addresses, jump IDs, and email. So IP addresses, we have a couple of partners that are able to share the IP addresses with us. And so based on your exposure, and that's at a household level, right? So based on the exposure, we're able to capture that data as an initial touch point or wherever that touch point is within the journey and add that to our attribution model. The jump ID essentially is a UTM code that lives within the Adobe Analytics environment, right? So really assume or think about it as a jump ID. So a line of code that we attach to the different media we have in market, online, digitally, that captures the journey and brings it to us. So wherever the exposure happens, pulls it in and brings it to us, and we're able to stitch it together from the different channels on which we're advertising. And then email, we all know about email, and it's ability to give us that first-party data, right? So a combination of this, kind of putting it into it and creating a secret sauce is essentially what we use to collect the data and effectively build that MTA model. So here, what I'm trying to do is after we connected the data together, we're able to see the journey thoroughly, right? So I'm just going to go through a simple example of how it works and how we've been able to do it, right? So let's assume Keith. And for the second time, I haven't run into a Keith yet, so that's great. So let's assume the person, there's a couple of assumptions here. The person already owns a printer, right? So without a printer, you don't really need ink. But let's assume Keith already owns a printer. Within the printer, we have inserts, which advertise the product, right? You can also have the product through self-discovery. But in this case, for simplicity's sake, Keith owns a printer with an insert. So based on the insert, Keith then goes to search for Instant Ink with his curiosity. So that becomes our first touch. And then once we capture that exposure from the ink search, it then takes us to, puts Keith into our retargeting pool, from which we retarget through a social ad, say Facebook, right? And then that essentially brings Keith back to the site. He then enrolls. Part of the enrollment will give you the option to download an app, which also then gives us the ability to continue to capture more first-party data. Through the app, Keith enrolls and eventually becomes an Instant Ink member. Now, what has that done for us? The table to the side, right, shows the average number of touches and the exposures, right? So before, without the cookies, all we could see was just truly just the last point of touch before the effective enrollment. But what this has essentially given us is a wider view, and most importantly, the value of incrementality and what we get on incremental media and incremental revenue from, right? So the one touch is showing what essentially will come from things like affiliate marketing and or should Keith have seen the insert and go straight to the insert and excite and enroll, right? So that we into together regardless of what's happening. So that's good. That's sort of a baseline for us. Where the value for us has been the 2 to 3 touches and the 4 to 7 touches, right? That incremental value that's been brought to the table. Essentially, where is that coming from, and how do we invest our media down the line as we try to understand, right? So we can see about, rough math here, just up over 35% incremental value when we start to actually open up the journey and look into it more and truly understand which of the channels are having an impact on the eventual enrollment, right? Now, we also see more than 7, debatable. We can see, do we invest media to get to that 7 exposures, or do we just set the 2 to 3 and maximize that, right? So that also helps us in our decision making when it comes to our media strategy as well as our budgeting. All right, so what were the results? So in this particular case, right, we did see our attributed conversions for specific channels, and in this case, I will push the next button for Facebook, go up 7x, right? So before, wherever Facebook's attribution lay in terms of the journey and its value to the eventual enrollment, that was increased 7x using this new MTA model that was not cookie-based, right? So with the deprecation of the cookie and or not using a cookie, we did not have that insight into the value of Facebook within the eventual enrollment and conversions. So this is the kind of value that we're seeing from the different channels, and it helps us understand where we're going to invest our money, what's our channel strategy, what's our media strategy. All right, so we've been doing this for about, roughly about 6 months, right? So through that 6 months, there's been a lot of learning, there's been a lot of growth in it, and now with the evolution of what we're seeing happening, where are we going, right? So our data sciences team and our media team have gotten together to try to explore how it is that we're going to move from where we are, that discovery phase, and really continue to evolve this and get it to a better place, right? So one caveat I should mention before is this MTA model is also heavily click-based, and so we did not get a lot of view through attribution unless, and you would see that later, unless it's coming from a partner or a channel that's able to share back, say, IP address data, right? But because it's heavily click-based, we do need that click touch or that click action in order for us to capture whatever we need to capture and perform the right attribution, right? So in our current state, you see that we have the attribution figured out. Now we want to move from attribution more to an optimization level, right? And then we'll look at the channel level insights, which is great, but I think a deeper, more granular level insights, and during one of our roundtables yesterday, I think we talked about this as well. If we can get to that level, that would also be more effective. That would also show the true value of media, right? As we talked about yesterday, looking at business objectives and looking at the media objectives, we talked with Imran and Sarah and all that about it on the table. And then even with the MMR models, when we also show that, it doesn't give the right attribution to the right channels, right? So that platform level insight is going to be very critical for us moving forward. And then we also talk about lower funnel insights. During the journey, when we build a full funnel strategy, we have the awareness portion, consideration, and then the eventual conversion. Currently, it focuses too much on the eventual conversion, but there are other touch points within the journey that's actually also bringing value, right? So we want to shift from just the lower level and just too hyper-focused on that eventual conversion to what that customer journey looks like, what that experience looks like, and where can we continue to invest and fill the pipeline, right? And then, as I mentioned before, that click-through model, as great as it is, we're also heavily investing in video, so it'll be good to see what the value of video and what it brings to the table, right? Again, we looked at that MMR presentation yesterday, and it didn't show, if we overlaid our current model over something like that, it would show a huge investment in video, but a very low return in video, right? And especially CTV. Who is clicking on CTV? I do not know, unless you QR code it. But that's where moving away from the click model and integrating more of a view-based model is also going to help us, right? So I'm just going to go through it quickly here and you'd see some of the results of where we're trying to go to. So when it comes to the attribution to optimization, an example is which page produces the most enrollments, right? So based on your product, you're driven to a particular page, right? So the different printers are different. We have the NV, OJ Pro, DeskJet. All have different ink needs and all that kind of thing, right? So which particular printer or which particular page is driving the most enrollment, right? And looking at same-day results, we're able to also, in as close to real time as possible, optimize to drive more traffic to a particular page given what's happening within the flight time of the campaign, right? So in this example, you'd see with the same-day results, which our attribution window tends to be about 90 days, depending on how you want to look at it, but we can also look at as close as 14 days. We see that the NV page is what's producing the most enrollments compared to OJ Pro, which is the same amount of traffic. So when you look at it at cost level, NV is probably our most efficient page, right? So that's where we start to drive more traffic, right? So this is the optimizations that we're looking for. Whereas before, we just see the total number of enrollments at a holistic level, and yes, that's great, but this gives us the more granularity that we need to make the effective decisions. Now, from the channel to the platform level insights, right? And here the example just shows the relationship between social and paid search, right? And as we all know, for the most part, most of the exposures in the first touch and second touch and, awareness consideration, whatever it may be, would oftentimes come from social, right? That's where we effectively building our awareness. That's where we're effectively building a lot of the consideration for the products, right? Rarely do we see search being a first touch channel. But something like this, the key here is before when we see it at more of a broad level of social versus paid search, we can go at a more platform level insights, and actually within social and within HP, we categorize YouTube as social. So pardon the example here, but within social, we see specifically YouTube as what is driving that incremental value for paid search. And then within paid search is specifically our branded links, right, from that exposure on the YouTube video calling out the brand, HP Instant Ink, leads to that branded search, right? So again, that's where our investments go when it comes to the search portion of things. We start to invest more heavily in our branded keywords versus more broad and or conquesting keywords. That's the layer of visibility this is looking to give us in our future state. Also helps us with that incrementality, right? And an objective level, and this is where I got most excited yesterday in our conversation at the roundtable, is our business and finance people tend to just really look at the bottom line. It's just the conversion part of the journey and what is that giving us and how is that affecting the bottom line, and do I continue to invest there? Again, that MMM model is kind of what helps us to truly understand it. But when we look at it holistically, yes, holistically we see that, and ignore the HP Plus activation side of things. That's a different product, at least to Instant Ink. But when we look at the Instant Ink enrollments, we see overall Q2 FY22, social drove 17,000 enrollments. Okay, that's all good and dandy. But within social, where were the different touch points that led to the most efficient cost? And again, leads to the effective budgeting decisions that we need to make, right? So when they look at something like this, we're able to break it out and say social awareness was able to drive this. We effectively measure against that KPI, social consideration, effective against that KPI, and then the purchase, right? Talking to those who may not be in the details of these things, we'll come and assume since social purchase is conversion driven, maybe that's where we invest in the most money. But then this kind of gives us a true understanding that more exposures and more impressions within the consideration side has led to a bigger number of enrollments and effectively a more efficient enrollment rate. And then the last one, and here provides us, in my opinion, the most opportunity for growth and the most opportunity for incrementality is being able to integrate the view-through in addition to what we currently have as a click-through based model, right? So the combination of both is going to lead and help us understand that incremental value that our view-through channels are provided, right? So we're thinking the YouTubes of the world, to the CTVs of the world, and then even OLVs, right? Essentially, what is the value of that? And really, within HP right now, that has been quite a bit of a power struggle, right? What is video bringing me, right? So really, we can look at this, combine this with the previous point, if I go back one, with objective level insights and see that most of our video activations do fall within our awareness and consideration side, right? So like we're looking to blend it. And again, that's the value that this is bringing us. We blend it and see, if I move to the next one here, that view-through has value, view-based media has value, and its value is also within the different points of the journey within the customer journey, right? So that view-through value, you see, looking at it holistically on just click-through, compared to what we get, view-through plus click-through gives us an extra almost 15,000 enrollments, effectively, right? So that's where the value of combine the click and the view, right? Just because they're seeing it and they're not clicking it, there's still some action being taken, right? So the click-through, as great as it is, and as high intent as it shows, has that limitation of showing us the true impact of the other media and market, right? So this is another part where I think once we're able to break through it, we'll be able to see true value of the different media and market. Now, most of the view-through right now, as we have discovered, is based on partners that are able to share back, specifically IP addresses for us to truly understand it. So right now we have Trade Desk being able to do that. And some display partners, a couple of CTV partners, MadHive is able to do that for us as well. And so as we build that out, we want to be able to partner with people who can share that data back with us to effectively understand the impact of our marketing and our media. And with that, I believe, oh, I'm not done. There's one more slide. Okay. So future stance, building a roadmap. There are some challenges that we've ran into doing this, right? So we look at the view-through data. I think I've talked about that a little bit. And then regulations. Regulations is probably the biggest pain and the most unpredictable side of all of this, which is, just recently, I believe Colorado became the 5th state to implement a new regulation on privacy laws and how to collect data and all that. Now, what is that going to look like in the future, right? Are we going to get a federal level regulation, or are the states all going to have their different regulations for how we collect the consumer data? How is that going to impact us down the road? How is that going to limit us effectively is what really was going to happen. And I think a couple of people shared, using the tightest regulations among the states is probably what's going to be best. GDPR has already happened in Europe. In California, we already have our CCPA, among many others that keep coming up. And so the regulations, I believe, is going to be the most unpredictable portion of the challenges ahead, right? Are they going to start regulating how much we can share back with regards to our IP addresses? Can we even collect IP address data without consent? And once you give the people the option, including myself, the option to opt out, they're more likely to take it and not want to, join it, exposing them to that. iOS has also been another one. And so that's going to be a very tough area to deal with in the future as more states move towards more stricter regulation and privacy and data concerns. And the regression modeling, I think, I've had a couple of conversations about this as well, but as we start to build that, plot and all of that, we truly understand, again, the impact and where the different channels that we're going through, the different platforms, the different places that we invest in, is bringing us the effective return on our media spend. And now with that, I will take questions.
Great, thank you, Roland. So, do we have any questions for Roland? Anybody? Yep.
Good morning, Roland.
Hello.
I want whatever you had for breakfast because your energy level is awesome. I'm still working on coffee here. So question though, on my HP, home office, desk right, there's also a sticker, right, on the outside of the printer. Just curious, so that just kind of sparked really the interest into offline, right? So you've got the sticker, you have the flyer, you have email, all the other digital touch points. So just curious, like how in your measurement and your models, you're factoring offline into that as well.
Yeah, so the incident product can only be purchased online, right? So that's the great part about it. You can't just walk into a store and pick up instant ink, right? But effectively, the offline media efforts we have to measure, right? So we're using things as special tracking codes. Should you come directly from there and enroll on it, right? Also, the association between whatever is on the sticker and your printer IDs, right? That enrollment within the printer and the activation of your actual printer includes some opt-in data that you got to provide, like your printer IDs and blah, blah, blahs. And, the point of impact is what I guess I should call it. If it was from the sticker, if it was from the insert within the printer box, right? So as we record that, we start to see how many of them were actual offline exposures that led to the eventual enrollment, right? So within our audiences, actually, and that's a great question, Jeff. Within our audiences and enrollment audiences, we do segment them by what we call a P1 audience and a P2 audience, meaning how many people enrolled within the first 7 days of printer activation, right? So detected when a printer went online and then they enrolled, and how many people enrolled after that, 14 to 45 days would be the second segment, right? And so if we tend to see more offline enrollments coming within the first 7 days, we know the inserts are having an impact. But if we tend to see more of it coming during the latter part of the enrollment window, and it's more digital based, then we know maybe we drove a little bit of curiosity, or at that point we stitch together within the journey where the initial exposure came from.
See, the coffee kicked in now. Follow-up question.
Yes.
So as far as usage, right? So again, especially like during COVID, all kids are at home, everyone's working from home. Are you also able to detect or forecast ink usage, such as by color? Because I know in a lot of times, like one color will run out, and then all of a sudden you can't print something. And also, then do you factor that into things like lifetime value as well? So usage and lifetime value. Just kind of curious your thoughts on those.
Yeah, so LTV, it was a big question I've been asking around here, because we have not been able to, we've been modeling it. I don't think we have anything that's ready for public release yet, right? Now, in terms of usage, the app that we have you download, and now with the newer printers that we are releasing, does actually track that, right? So we actually take that data back in terms of production and how much we produce for a particular color, right? And as we know, usually it's the 2 cartridges that go in, the black and then the colored cartridges. So more often than not, that's also the value of this particular product, is it tracks to anticipate and forecast when it is that you're going to run out, and doesn't wait for you to run out before it orders it, right? So actually one of the taglines we use is never run out of ink, right? So a forecast based on your habits and your printing habits over the last however long it is, right? So let's assume 3 months. These have been your consistent printing habits. This is where you are, maybe 20%. It's about the point, right? So it's constantly learning what your behavior and what your printing habits are in order to anticipate when you need it and then get it to your door before you run out and you need. Yeah.
Anybody else? Oh. It's the longest walk.
Hey, Roland, just a quick question. Do you have prompts on the screen as your ink is running out? Do you have inbuilt messaging within the printer screen prompts that get people to sign up or get people to acknowledge some kind of a consent for you to send them ink?
That is a fantastic idea.
If you don't, you should get it.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
Yes, you are prompted. It actually does it by pages as well. So it will say, like, your page usage is over-indexing compared to normal or under-indexing. We're doing renovations on our house and we unplugged our printers. I received an email that, we can't track her page usage.
Where'd you go?
Yeah, and that's the HP Plus functionality, right? So you see in the data, I talked specifically about the ink side, but that's the HP Plus functionality, which I'm glad you enrolled in that, because we're trying to push that as well to essentially track that, right? Now, I think there's going to be more value if we can make that, if we can add that into our messaging. I think there's going to be value there, right? And that's what I'm taking from it. So no, thank you very much for that. So if we can do that, I think it could also provide incremental value for us. But right now, the HP Plus essentially is an intelligent, smart, and it's a free enrollment, which essentially tracks and lets you know when you're running out, tracks and lets you know when you're over-indexing. Because our pricing plan is also by not ink quantity, but the number of pages that you're printing, right? So we do bring you to a page that shows you, okay, so if you're doing 10 to 20 pages a month, there's a pricing plan you belong to. If you're doing a little above that, this is where you belong. And then based on that, right, it makes adjustments and could recommend you to go down or go up. Now, we want more people to go up than go down, but but yeah, using that to then add within our messaging, I think it's going to be effective. I don't think it's something that we do currently, and that's why I say it's a great idea, but I think we should integrate that into our marketing efforts, yes.
He'll get your banking information later.
Get
Did
this
anyone else
information.
have a question? I thought I saw a hand. Yes?
Oh, sorry. It's kind of nice to use a mic. Do you find that you're sort of chicken and egg, like you're picking partners because they have, they're willing to share IPs versus others that don't, you're prioritizing those partners, so that's influencing the channels you run in order to get this multi-touch attribution data? Or are you still able to test, I see you doing like consideration stuff on Google and stuff like that, but I just wondered how the modeling is now influencing, from a tracking perspective, how you would do your media investing and your budget breakouts, things like that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think, for the most part, yes, it depends on what they can ingest and what they can share back with us, right? So if we're going to run with you, if we're able to get that data back, and you can get us that incrementality, the scale, and get us in front of the right audiences, those are the first steps, right? We talk about that, okay, we'll figure it out. Because, as much as we want to go into this MTA model holistically, we know there's still going to be some blind spots, right? So if we can find partners that are effectively producing the right scale, the right incrementality, and the right audiences, right? Filling out pipelines, certainly worth the conversation there. But yes, it's going to be critical. The better and the more that they can track and/or accept from us and ingest, the better potential for relationship there. Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you, Roland. That was awesome. We really
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
it.